Welcome, friends. We're indeed fortunate to have access to the internet to connect with fellow humans worldwide. Today, there will be a talk and question and answer period on permanent and transitory man. Then, from 12:05 to 1 p.m., we will continue our discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. So first, there will be a presentation of the Declaration of UOT, our devotional reading, and mention of the three fundamentals necessary to understand the Secret Doctrine and nature's laws. After our scheduled meeting time, you're invited to stay with us for a general discussion. So, Declaration of the UOT will be, hi Kathy, how you doing?
Great, thanks.
So you're just in time for the declaration. If anybody wants to take that, you can go ahead and do it.
Sure, I can read that.
Okay.
The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all.
Thank you. Our devotional reading is from the Voice of the Silence, starting on page 63. Be of good cheer, O daring pilgrim, to the other shore. Heed not the whisperings of Mara's host. Wave off the temptation, you know where it's from. Those ill natured sprites, the judgeless ramen of in endless space. Hold firm, thou nearest now the middle portal, the gate of woe, with its 10,000 snares. Have mastered all thy thoughts, O striver for perfection. If thou wouldst cross this threshold, have mastery over thy soul, O seeker after truth undying. Of that, if thou wouldst reach the goal, the soul gaze center on the one pure light, the light that is free from affection, and use thy golden key. The dreary task is done. Thou labor well nigh o'er. The wide abyss that gaped to swallow. The wide abyss that gaped to swallow thee is almost spanned. Thou hast now crossed the moat that circles round the gate of human passions. Thou hast now conquered Mara and his furious host. Thou hast removed pollution from thine heart and bled it from impure desire. But, O thou glorious combatant, thy task is not yet done. Build high, Alanu, the walls which shall hedge in the holy isle, the dam that will protect the mind from pride and satisfaction at thoughts of the great feat achieved. A sense of pride will mar the work. Build it strong, with the fierce rush of batting waves that mount and beat the shore from out the great world-wide ocean, swallow up the pilgrim and the isle, yea, even when the victory is achieved. We want to touch on the fundamental propositions. Does somebody want to do that?
Do you want me to? I can pull it up.
Okay, well, I got it going.
Okay.
Nature's laws, as presented in Secret Doctrines, are based on three fundamentals which act together as one. First, there is the ever-present, eternal, and boundless principle that extends beyond human understanding. You hear about that as Atma, a little bit. It is beingness rather than being, and is thought of as the great breath, the one reality, dynamic energy, the rootless root, the causeless cause, and might be thought of as the force of the small, unselfish force that wells up within the individual. Spirit, matter, life, the spirit of the universe. We are all invited to partake of what we can at our state of development. The second fundamental involves the absolute universality of that law of periodicity of flux and reflux, ebb and flow, which physical science has observed and recorded in all departments of nature. Day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking are facts so common, so perfectly universal, and without exception, that it is easy to comprehend that in it we see one of the absolute fundamentals, laws of the universe. Within that law are many other cycles in the laws of karma and reincarnation. The third fundamental is on evolution. The cycle of incarnation and necessity. No spiritual divine soul can have an independent conscious existence before the spark from its essence has passed through every elemental form and has acquired individuality first by natural impulse and then by self-induced and self-devised effort, checked by karma, from the mental implant up to the holiest archangel, Diana Buddha. Today's talk is on the permanent and transitory man.
Hello, thank you, Herb. Are you able to see my screen at the moment?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let me. I mean the slides? Are you able to?
No, we don't see. Now, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We got it.
Perfect. All right, good morning, everyone. As was mentioned, today's discussion topic is on the permanent and transitory aspects of a human being. To be able to differentiate these aspects, it will be important to first lay out and define the principles that make up the human constitution. In the teachings of Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky describes the human being as consisting of 7 principles, divided into a higher triad and a lower quaternary. These 7 principles, or 7 parts of our nature, are the divine principle, Atma, the spiritual principle, Buddhi, the intellectual manas, the passional kama, the vital prana, the astral linga sharira, and the physical principle stula sharira. The first three of these that I mentioned comprise the higher triad, and they carry on from lifetime to lifetime, while the lower four last just for one lifetime and are renewed in each lifetime that we have. The lower quaternary gravitates near dense matter. The immortal triad has an affinity with Atma. Between the immortal triad and the mortal quaternary, we find Antahkarana. That is the bridge connecting Buddhi manas to Kama manas. Here is Madame Blavatsky's commentary on the Antahkarana from the Theosophical Glossary. Antahkarana serves as a medium of communication between the higher manas and lower manas, and conveys from the lower to the higher ego all those personal impressions and thoughts of men which can, by their nature, be assimilated and stored by the undying entity, and be thus made immortal with it. These being the only elements of the evanescent personality that survive death and time. It thus stands to reason that only that which is noble, spiritual, and divine in man can testify in eternity to his having lived. Let's now take each of these principles shown here, one by one, starting with Atma, and define them in a bit more detail. Atma, also written as Atman at times, is the highermost and supreme part of man's spiritual being. It is pure, eternal spirit. It is not an individual thing. There's neither my Atman nor your Atman, but only the Atman, the one universal self of all. It is here that all is truly one. Atman is who and what we really are. It is our essential nature, and it is our true self. In fact, it's the one and only reality. As the Upanishads say, this Atman is Brahman. Since the Atman is literally divinity itself, we should always remember that it never incarnates or reincarnates, nor is it ever affected by our karma or even by anything whatsoever. It just simply is. Buddhi is the second highest principle of man's constitution, and it's referred to as the spiritual soul, the vehicle through which Atma radiates its light. There's nothing individual about the Buddhi principle. As with Atma, we cannot talk in terms of my Buddhi or your Buddhi, and the monad you see here is a term used to describe the conjunction of the two highest principles of the human constitution, Atma and Buddhi. And it means ultimate unit or primary unit. Because Atma is divinity itself, it has to have a vehicle through which to radiate its light to the individual soul. Buddhi is this vehicle of Atma, and so the two in conjunction with each other are called the monad. Our fifth principle is the manas principle. In its exoteric meaning, this stands for the mind or intelligence. It has a dual nature, that of higher manas and lower manas. When the mind and consciousness are lifted, raised, and elevated towards higher things, spiritual, abstract things, intellectual, things of goodness, truth, purity, love, compassion, it is then functioning as the higher manas and rising ever closer to the divine shining light of Buddhi and the spiritual soul. But when the mind and consciousness are instead allowed to sink downwards towards the lower, separative, selfish and sensual things of life, it is lower manas, attaching itself to the principle of kama, the animal soul. The future state and the karmic destiny of man depend on whether manas gravitates more downward to kama rupa or upwards to Buddhi, the spiritual ego. And to reiterate here, the three principles we just reviewed, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, make up our imperishable upper triad, or the permanent aspects of man. Now, if we switch our attention to the principles making up our lower quaternary, we start with kama. Kama, which literally means desire in Sanskrit, is the desire principle of the human being when in physical incarnation. It is the source and center of his desires, passions, lusts, and essential nature. It's sometimes referred to as the animal soul in the literature because it's the more animalistic part of us. Prana is the life force, vitality, or energy which keeps the physical body alive. It is the life principle, the breath of life in the individual. A person remains in physical incarnation for as long as prana remains active within them. As soon as prana departs and ceases to flow, the physical body has no other option than to die, since it's the force of prana which keeps it going. Linga Sharira, called the astral body, is the subtle, unseen double of the dense physical body. It's the form, mold, and blueprint upon and around which the dense physical body is built. It comes into existence before the physical body, and it only fully fades out and dies when the very last remaining particle of the deceased physical body disappears and disintegrates, except the skeleton. The astral body can also be thought of as the vital body or energy body of the human being, because it's the vehicle through which prana, the third principle, flows to the physical body. It is this part of our constitution which is utilized in the activities which have become known as astral travel, astral projection, and so forth. Astral body's main connection point with the physical body is in the area of the spleen, and these two bodies that we have are connected with one another throughout each lifetime by a sort of unseen umbilical cord, which some have called the silver thread or silver cord. Sthula Sharira is the Sanskrit name for the dense physical body. It is not in strict truth a principle in itself, but is simply the vehicle of all the other principles during physical incarnation. Sthula Sharira is described as being the child of Linga Sharira, its mother, by conception of Prana, its father, and it is our outer shell. Now that we established the basis for the 7 principles of human beings, let's turn our discussion to the mechanics of how these principles present themselves life after life through reincarnation, along with their associated causes and some of the reasons behind their existence. And we find these in the teachings of karma. Theosophy teaches that nature never leaves her work unfinished. When she evolves a human embryo, the intention is that a man shall be perfected physically, intellectually, and spiritually. His body is to grow mature, wear out, and die. His mind unfold, ripen, and be harmoniously balanced. His divine spirit illuminate and blend easily with the inner man. No human being completes its grand cycle or the circle of necessity until all these are accomplished. The Buddha taught the path to complete the circle of necessity in his doctrine of poverty, restriction of the senses, perfect indifference to the objects of this earthly desires, freedom from passion, frequent intercommunication with Atma, soul contemplation. The cause of reincarnation is ignorance of our senses and the idea that there's any reality in the world, anything except abstract existence. From the organs of sense comes the hallucination we call contact. From contact, desire. From desire, sensation. From sensation, the cleaving to existing bodies. And from this cleaving, reproduction. From reproduction, disease, decay, and death. Thus, like the revolutions of a wheel, there's a regular succession of death and birth, the moral cause of which is the cleaving to existing objects, while the instrumental cause is karma, the power which controls the universe, prompting it to activity. Intimately connected with karma is the law of rebirth, or of the reincarnation of the same spiritual individuality in a long series of personalities. These personalities are like the various costumes and characters played by the same actor, with each of which that actor identifies himself and is identified by the public for the space of a few hours. Mystics and occultists down the ages have uniformly asserted the truth of reincarnation. The main and central idea is that the human soul is immortal and unfolding. Its growth takes place in the soil of the body. The law of cycles by which the processes of nature take place compels a logical mind to arrive at the conclusion that reincarnation represents the cycle of human evolution. Man is born and dies as the universe is making the vast cycles of the days and nights of Brahma. Voltaire saw this when he said, "It is not more surprising to be born twice than once. Everything in nature is resurrection." Men of modern knowledge accept numerous aspects of reincarnation. Recurrence and resurrection create the spiral of progress everywhere. Death and regeneration are to be seen everywhere. Why should it be otherwise with man's body, which dies, but which must refashion itself with the will to live, which every human soul possesses? This is the most ancient of doctrines. But who or what is it that reincarnates? It is not the body, for that dies and disintegrates. It's not the astral body, for that also has its term and must go to pieces after the physical has gone. Nor it is the passions and desires. They, to be sure, have a very long term because they have the power to reproduce themselves in each life so long as we don't eradicate them. And reincarnation provides for that, since we're given by it many opportunities of slowly, one by one, killing off the desires and passions which disfigure the heavenly picture of the spiritual man. The passional part of us coalesces with the astral after death and makes a seeming being that has a short life to live while it is disintegrating. When the separation is complete between the body that has died, the astral body, and the passions and desires, the higher triads, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, who are the real man, immediately go into another state. And when that state, which is called Devachan, or another word for it can be heaven, is over, they're attracted back to earth for reincarnation. They are the immortal part of us. They, in fact, and no other are we. This should be firmly grasped by us, for upon its clear understanding depends on the comprehension of the entire doctrine. Although reincarnation is the law of nature, the complete trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas does not yet fully incarnate in our race. They use and occupy the body by means of the entrance of Manas, the mind principle, the lowest of the three, and the other two shine upon it from above, constituting the God in heaven. This was symbolized in the old Jewish teaching about the heavenly man, Adam Kadmon, who stands with his head in heaven and his feet in hell. That is, the head, Atma, and Buddhi are yet in heaven, and the feet, Manas, walk in hell, which is the body and physical life. For that reason, man is not yet fully conscious, and reincarnations are needed to at least complete the incarnation of the whole Trinity in the body. When that has been accomplished, the race will have become as gods, and the godlike Trinity being in full possession, the entire mass of matter will be perfected and raised up for the next step. This is the real meaning of the Word made flesh. It was so grand a thing in the case of any single person, such as Jesus or Buddha, as to be looked upon as a divine incarnation. This coming into life over and over again cannot be avoided by the ordinary man because lower manas is still bound by desire, which is the dominating principle at our present period. Being so influenced by desire, manas is continually deluded while in the body, and being thus deluded is unable to prevent the action upon it of the forces set up in the lifetime. These forces are again generated by manas, that is by the thinking of the lifetime. Each thought makes a physical as well as mental link with the desire in which it is rooted. All life is filled with such thoughts, and when the period of rest after death is ended, manas is bound by innumerable electrical magnetic threads to earth by reason of the thoughts of the last life, and therefore by desire. For it was desire that caused so many thoughts and ignorance of the true nature of things. An understanding of this doctrine of man being really a thinker and made of thought will make clear all the rest in relation to incarnation and reincarnation. The body of the inner man is made of thought, and this being so, it must follow that if the thoughts have more affinity for earth life than for life elsewhere, a return to life here is inevitable. Let's restate before going to details. The real man is the trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or spirit and mind, and he uses certain agents and instruments to get in touch with nature in order to know himself. These instruments and agents are found in the lower four, each principle in which category is of itself an instrument for the particular experience belonging to its own field, the body being the lowest, least important, and most transitory of the whole series. Having gone over the field and shown what are the lower principles, we find Theosophy teaching that at the present point of man's evolution, he's a fully developed quaternary, with the higher principles partly developed. It is because the Trinity is not yet incarnate in the race that life has so many mysteries, some of which are showing themselves from day to day in all the various experiments made on and in man. Reincarnation does not mean that we go into animal forms after death. Once a man, always a man, is the saying in the Great Lodge. Evolution, having brought Manas, the thinker and immortal person, onto this plane, cannot send him back to the animal, which does not have Manas. The idea that things can cease to exist and still be is a fundamental one in Eastern psychology. Under this apparent contradiction in terms, there rests the fact of nature to realize. Existence, as water may be said to be, for oxygen and hydrogen, a state of non-being, which is more real being than their existence as gases, and it may faintly symbolize the condition of the universe when it goes to sleep or ceases to be during the nights of Brahma, to awaken or reappear again when the dawn of the new mantra recalls it to what we call existence. We may now pose the question, what is the universe for, and for what final purpose is man, the immortal thinker, here in evolution? It is all for the experience and emancipation of the soul, for the purpose of raising the entire mass of manifested matter up to the stature, nature, and dignity of conscious godhood. The great aim is to reach self-consciousness, not through a race or a tribe or some favorite nation, but by and through the perfecting after transformation of the whole mass of matter, as well as what we now call soul. Nothing is or is to be left out. The aim for present man is his initiation into complete knowledge. And for the other kingdoms below him, that they may be raised up gradually from stage to be in time initiated also. This is evolution carried to its highest power. It's a magnificent prospect. It makes of man a god and gives to every part of nature the possibility of being one day the same. There's strength and nobility in it, for by this no man is dwarfed and belittled, for no one is so originally sinful that he cannot rise above all sin. The old theosophical view makes the universe a vast, complete, and perfect whole. Successive lives on earth in human bodies for the unfolding of mind-soul of man is a reasonable and satisfying doctrine. It solves problems and answers questions that no other doctrine does. It is logical, and our minds are satisfied if we examine its basis and principles. It not only engenders hope in the heart, but also brings it the contentment born of understanding and the dauntless energy to press forward on the road to self-improvement, leading to self-realization. Some might wonder why HPB and others well-known in the Theosophical movement lay so much stress on doctrines like karma and reincarnation, because they're the very keynotes of the higher evolution of man. Without karma and reincarnation, evolution is but a fragment, a process whose beginnings are unknown and whose outcome cannot be discerned, a glimpse of what might be, a hope of what should be. But in the light of karma and reincarnation, evolution becomes the logic of what must be. The links in the chain of being are all filled in, and the circles of reason and of life are complete. Karma gives the eternal law of action, and reincarnation furnishes the boundless field for its display. Knowing something as to our essential nature, knowing something of the purpose of life, and that life is all made up of learning, knowing that the universe is all alive, and that there's in reality no injustice save that which we inflict upon ourselves by reaction, we would take an entirely different view of life and put these ideas into daily practice. We would take the position which most of all we need to take, that of our own responsibility. Recognizing that each one of us is from the same source and going towards the same goal, though the path will vary with the pilgrim, we will act towards each one as if he were a part of ourselves. Like us, each one is moving onward, perhaps below us, possibly above. From the one above, we can obtain help. To the one below, we can give help. Such is the interdependence which should exist between all conscious beings. We should see each one trying to discipline himself, trying to bring himself into proper relation with all the rest, not so much outwardly perhaps as inwardly. For we may be sure that if we make clean the inside of the bowl, the outside will take care of itself. We have no greater duty to perform than to make clear and clean our natures, to make them true, to make them in accord with the great object of all life, the evolution of soul. And this concludes today's prepared remarks. Thank you very much for listening. Now it's time for comments, questions, or any discussions in general.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question. In my journey of self-knowledge, I've come to the conclusion that there are our physical body, our desires, and our thoughts, and there's this thing which takes the shape of the I principle, I-ness. I believe, is it Antahkarana?
I principle, Antakarana, I would say no. I mean, different philosophies have different ways of constructing I principle. I meaning, is it self or ego, or is that what you're referring to, Batuan?
I mean, it's just the thought. It's the thought that I am I. Is it a product of manas?
Yes, in Theosophy, let me share this again. In Theosophy, the way it's being discussed are principles. These are planes of existence, so to speak, the seven that we show here. It starts with the physical body at the physical plane, astral body. I mentioned the life energy, which is called prana, and then the desires and passions, as you mentioned. That's the fourth principle listed here. And then the I principle, the personality, the lower ego, and the higher ego. That's our fifth principle, and Theosophy tells us that this is the principle that the humanity is currently working on perfecting, so to speak. So the lower aspect is the personality, selfish thoughts and things like that. But as you know, our mind can go either way, and I'm sure we can all relate to the fact that sometimes we have higher thoughts that of altruism, selflessness, helping others, being more universal, so to speak, right? The lower aspect is being selfish and more self-centered, as in lower self. So that's the aspect that we're working on. And earlier, we also talked about the Atma Buddhi. Those are the higher, the sixth and the seventh principles. So the goal is to, for our mind to connect more with those Atma Buddhi principles and less so with the lower bodies that we have. But anyone else, please jump in. Or Batuan, was that helpful?
one more thing, and above all of these cognitions, there is a pure witness principle that witnesses all of the cognitions, whether it is desires, passions, or thoughts. It's pure, it's immutable, it's partless. Is this the pure witness principle, Atma?
I would say so. Yes. Yes. That's the universal. Yes. That is the principle. But as I said, Atma needs a vehicle to be more in manifestation, so to speak, because it's pure spirit. You know, it needs a vehicle to show up in manifestation. So that's why we kind of group Atma Buddhi together, and that's why we show it like that here as the vehicle of pure universal spirit. But I would say yes, Atma is what you're referring to, I think, from what I'm understanding.
Thank you. And what else can be said about Buddhi apart from being the vehicle of Atma? Because Blavatsky doesn't really, give a comprehensive, explanation in what I read.
About what term? I'm sorry.
Buddhi. What is Buddhi? What can we say about Buddhi apart from being the vehicle of pure universal spirit? Can you explain Buddhi further?
Absolutely. So I'm going to refer to the glossary. I don't know if you have access or a link to the Theosophical glossary. So I'm going to try to find a further explanation there. Yeah, I'm looking, but if anyone else can help answer Batuan's question on Buddhi, if there's a further explanation.
I think Buddhi is also referred to as spiritual intellection as opposed to lower intellect. And as you said, it has to be for Atma to be truly active, an active principle. It needs an active Buddhi to be able to access the higher aspect in each.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see other terms that Madame Blavatsky uses as latent consciousness. It's more of a passive and latent principle. So it needs Atma to be able to, I guess, be that vehicle. So she also mentions the Buddhi in man is the vehicle of Atman, which the vehicle is of the essence of the highest plane of Akasha, and therefore does not differentiate. So it receives its light of wisdom from Atma, from the higher principle, and gets its rational qualities from Manas. So it does not have any attributes according to her. So it gets its light from Atma and the rational qualities from Manas. So it's kind of, it needs both to be able to be that vehicle. Otherwise, Blavatsky says there are no attributes associated with Buddhi.
Thank you.
And I found a good article that summarizes some of these things. So I'll put that in the chat, and you can certainly read that further if you like. There's a lot of commentary here.
So Atma then is like a circle with no boundaries, if you will. It is everything and everywhere. We breathe Atma, we breathe that, In other words, yeah, it is everything and and what you just described was going down to the list of making ourselves one with it. If we can do that, then you talk about the untouched Corona bridge and so forth. I think the perfected individuals are just living within Atma Buddhi Manas. They've got the other four while they're body embodied, but they are in control of that. Therefore, that is not part of them anymore. In that untouched Corona bridge that you presented, that in other words, the Satsarana and the lower four lump into the higher three, right? Is that what we're shooting for, to be like that?
I didn't get the full question, but maybe I can share it again. So the goal is to perfect each of the principles that we have, right? Some are not fully incarnate due to, various reasons. But here, this student's understanding is the lower four we have perfected. Now we are working on the fifth principle, which is the manas. And that's why there's that duality. That mind principle is not perfect. That's why it's going to selfish thoughts, and at times it goes to the universal thoughts. So the goal is to make this manas a more connected to Buddhi manas or Buddhi Atma, so that this is these higher principles, Atma Buddhi, can shine their light. Atma specifically using Buddhi, shine its light more fully and incarnate it in manifestation more. Basically, so Atma needs mind principle to be able to. No, that's not how I should say it. Manas principle needs to be, I would say, more perfected so that it acts more in line with its higher aspect. So, Herb, I don't know what your question was exactly, but
I think you hit on it, because the minus part of the equation, Atma and Buddhi, and you said Atma is everywhere. So we just partake of that what we can. We're in our current state of development. Buddhi is more of a vehicle for Atma, trying to working toward understand it from a personal level. So manas is what you keep talking about, and I think that's really that's in what we the manas part, the higher manas part of us is the developed part of manas. The rest of us is in stage of being developed. That's the way I understand it.
Yeah.
So,
And the question on Antakarana, is it basically the lower manas in essence? What is your understanding of that?
I think it's the bridge between the lower manas and the higher manas. That's how it's shown here. It's sort of the path that we need to walk in our lives. So we talked about the difference between the lower and the higher manas, and this is the link, the connecting link between the two. And I gave a definition of it earlier from the glossary. I'll read some part of it again. Blavatsky says Antakarana is a It serves as a medium of communication between the lower and the higher manas. And it conveys from lower to the higher ego all those personal impressions and thoughts of man, and assimilated and stored. So it helps helps the linkage and helps helps transfer our in this lifetime the effort that we put in, and quote unquote the perfect attributes, the mind attributes, basically to the higher triad from the lower.
So,
So
in,
it's called
so-
the path or bridge.
but in the voice of the silence, we are taught to either destroy or remove the antaskarana or antakarana. So does that mean, are we raising it? I mean, you can't completely destroy it, right?
Yes, raising it. She says it's this antaskarana is formed by thought. So by for example studying theosophy, it gives us the right basis for thinking, and as we have the change our thinking, there's this path, this bridge that there's there. So it sets up a corresponding influence to the higher manas, and it basically helps with unionizing the manas with Buddhi and Atma.
Okay.
So yeah, it can be thought of as a bridge or a link that's always there, and it's just a matter of strengthening that bridge by having the right thoughts and having the mind principle more in line with Atma Buddhi.
Thanks.
You sort of answer the question I had and it was, what sort of activities would facilitate that passage through the bridge and Taskarana? And you said that right thinking, and I guess that leads also to meditation. And what happens to people who have the right thinking and are philanthropists and are working for others, but do not necessarily believe in reincarnation, but they are connecting the lower manas to higher manas? Is that something that may enhance or their future reincarnations and will lead to a more altruistic life? Or what are your thoughts on that, on the people who not necessarily follow this line of thought?
Yeah, certainly that is in line with it's strengthening that link. Yeah, one does not need to study theosophy, etc., to be a theosophist, as we all have read in various books, literature, and theosophy. So if you are putting into practice these things that we read, that certainly goes a very long way in terms of becoming embodying the higher aspects of yourself. So altruism, selflessness, being universal without necessarily being exposed to theosophy, that still means a lot, and that means a lot of progress for your future incarnations, and to be sure in this lifetime too. So as long, and those acts would certainly indicate that you have the right thinking too. So your mind principle would also be in line with your actions. So for the student, yes, it would mean it doesn't hinder your progress if you're not aware of theosophy at all. So yeah, and all the religions talk about these qualities, right? So these are just ways of us to get our mind, our thinking principle, being more in line with those universal concepts that we just mentioned.
Oh, I had my hand up. I just wanted to add about the antakarna or antaskarna. That's not a principle. It's more as Crosby calls it, a mode of consciousness. It's only active during the waking state. For example, that bridge doesn't exist during sleep. And it conveys, it's sort of like it's a two-way street in some ways, because if the lower conveys up to the higher manas, it said, but if it doesn't reflect, if the lower doesn't reflect anything from the higher, like the true inspiration from art and music and philosophy and aspiration, all those can be made a part of the permanent individuality from the lower to the higher. But if the lower doesn't reflect anything, that bridge will atrophy if it's not used. But if used, it will strengthen and become, you know, more or less permanent. And at that point, sort of, I guess you could say, when everything is transferred from the lower to the higher for that life, there comes a point when, you know, if that individuality lives permanently in the higher triad, that's the destroying the antaskarana, because it's considered the battlefield where the impressions are, it's like a highway of impressions. And that's why at a very high stage, the voice of the silent says it needs to be destroyed, because then the individuality has been perfected and there is not a need to, like, for the lower anymore. But of course, as we know in Theosophy, you know, many beings who could affect that do reincarnate purposely to teach others and to help raise the consciousness of the race.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for that. Kathy, and one question there. You mentioned during sleep. Are you referring to between the sleep between lifetimes, or just in general, our day to day? This when we're sleeping, there's not that bridge.
Just from day to day,
Okay.
because the bridge between the higher and lower is active when the consciousness is normal. But for example, during sleep, it has no existence, according to Robert Crosby.
Understood. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. When during sleep, we said that we're in sleep now during the waking state, but that's a different story. But the point is, in the midnight, that's when we're deep sleep. That is kind of like the longer sleep that we have between lifetimes. That is very often connected with that, to explain what we have between lifetimes. So it's a one-way traffic, is the way what I got out of what Kathy said and what you said too. Once we have overcome all of our lower tendencies, once we attempted no more, because everything is in the higher level. That's a one-way traffic. One-way. But yeah, you're living in the permanent, like a perfected being is. And it said also, I've heard it said, the antaskarana is absorbed by the lower, and and also that it no longer is needed, because you live in the higher all the time. That's how that's the difference between perfected being and us.
Yeah.
The comment I have is like it's still related to the principles, and it seems to me, if we were to use analogy, an incarnation is like pretty much like being in school in one specific grade, what happens to people who, knowing that we're going to reincarnate and we have many more chances to come back and learn our lessons, they decide to, okay, this lifetime I'm going to be lazy because I'm going to have more chances. My question, actually, or comment is, what are the benefits of knowing that there are cycles? We come over and over until we get perfected, or there are more. What are the benefits of knowing that? Because some people may, by knowing this literature, may think that, oh, we have many chances, no effort whatsoever in this lifetime, because I can do it next time.
Yeah, I think that you are alluding again to the mind principle, right? Knowing, thinking the right way. You can go either way, as you're saying. You can either, by reading this, you say, oh, there's immense cycles here, so I can just sit out this lifetime and not do anything. Or, oh, there's immense cycles. There's a lot of work to be done. I should get to it now. So it just depends on your constitution, your tendencies, skandhas, and it's up to you. And we constantly say in Theosophy, self-induced, self-devised methods. We need to come up with how we, by exposing ourselves to this, having a basic understanding, I think then it's up to us to make those decisions. But if you just sit back, I would say and not do anything that will increase your certain tendencies, right? And you will be more, you will have to work through those in a future life, right? Laziness is a tendency that you need to overcome. And I would say, instead of attaching yourself to that, why not, try to work on these concepts, as you said, because it's a school. This is the only way our soul can progress. So it'd be a waste, I would say, to not take action.
What you were saying about what Carolina raised the question about, that's kind of like being on a subway, and you decided not to get off on at that stop. In other words, it's wasted. If you don't progress, you just keep on going to where you were before. Can't they help?
No, that was well said. I mean, the risk is that, the desire nature will modify the lower manas to an extent that it'll increase ties to sensual existence and life on earth, and bring it in a downward direction. So. But focusing on the higher, even like a little bit of aspiration can go a long ways. It's said, there, I'll have to find it. There's some saying like even 1 or 2 aspirations will, carry that ego to, into a devachan, and that assimilation process will help bring it higher for the next life. So I guess the point is that our thoughts and matter, because they, every thought modifies, the mind takes on the shape of the, so to speak, the thought and energy put into the, into the thought, whether it's higher or lower. So we're constantly modifying the mind, and our thoughts matter, essentially.
Yep.
I think even in the Gita, Krishna says that even a fleeting thought before passing on some higher aspect will bring you in contact with that source in the future life. So.
Mm-hmm.
I just would like to throw it too. You mentioned development of the soul And we do have a talk coming up the 1st of September, I think, on evolution of the soul.
Yeah.
So this help that you gave today was very helpful for that talk as well as everything else. This is Theosophy 101 and 2022.
Yeah, and I also saw that we have, was it Antakarana? We have a talk coming up for that too, right? So hopefully this serves as a good basic foundation for those topics coming up, as you said, Herb. Oh, you're on mute, Herb, if you're talking.
I wanted to ask you that I just read this morning about being from a Christian background, relating to the Christian thinking and the theosophical thinking, and this is a continuing. This is not just a theory that we learn and put on the shelf. This is something that we have to apply every day. And I thought that article I think I sent it this morning. Should I put that out there for everybody to look at, or?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, speaker, should we move on then to the Bhagavad Gita after a 5-minute break?
I would say so, yes. There are no other questions, comments, it seems. So, yeah, happy to do so.
Okay, hopefully we'll see you all back in about 5 minutes, and we can continue our study of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you.